Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
82 to 84.
Okay, so during the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
I got you. I bet that was an interesting time on Wall Street. Wow.
So you sort of go back in so between the regulators, you've got the Federal Reserve, you've got the OCC, and you had some others. And back then, the Fed was the more powerful one, not the OCC, and that changed over time. So it sort of goes up and down in waves of who was the more aggressive regulator.
I got you.
But it was eye-opening, to say the least. And
so after the Federal Reserve, where did you go to work?
I got a job for a nonprofit in Boston called EBA.
Okay.
Inquilinos por Quas in Acción. So it's a nonprofit CDC. And so I was doing housing development, which I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
But then I volunteered and spent time with two of the major players in Boston. Mel King, who is a civil rights icon,
Okay.
loves tennis. He insisted on playing. When he played tennis, it had to be like at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. It was just did that. And the other person, Dominic Bazzato, who was head of the Hotel Workers Union, Local 26.
Okay.
And actually, he was doing an overview of EBA at the time. So I met Dominic and Mel. And then I volunteered with both of them. Then I volunteered with the hotel workers more, doing that and helping them out on their community outreach and their contract negotiations, getting support. So I worked for EBA for about probably a year and a half, 2 years. And then I got a job at the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation. And that is now called NeighborWorks. And I did that for less than a year. I was fired because I told them that I was up in Rutland, Vermont, doing outreach because you're assigned these NHS's neighborhood housing services to do work with.
Right.
And when I was there, the only problem is that they saw me on Channel 7 News in Boston supporting the hotel workers' contract negotiations.
Oh no.
So that didn't work out. They said
that didn't work out too well.
I thought you were in Vermont. Well, yeah. So I was fired from there. Went to volunteer with the Hotel Workers Local 26 full time, and then I ended up creating a position there because a guy he was a political operative, ran for mayor in Boston, Joe Timilty. He was going around saying that the union had $5 million in pension monies to invest. Dominic yells out of his office, does anybody know anything about housing or finance? I said, yeah, that's my background.
Mm-hmm.
I just figured I was going to be a union organizer. So we got into that. And
wow.
So that's where it started. We started trying to do housing development. That didn't work. And then we said, well, why don't we negotiate a housing trust fund? For the hotel workers, so that they could, they could live close to where they worked.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said that makes sense. You can negotiate for benefits and wages and all that. Problem was it was illegal because with the Taft-Hartley Act, if that type of benefit is not a permissive subject of bargaining, then you could not even talk about it. Well, what we did, so we ended up doing a campaign for probably took us about a year and a half. And in the 1988 contract, we got the hotel owners to agree to that because we did the outreach to our membership. And Dominic was a new leader in the hotel workers union because prior to Dominic becoming head of it, if you worked in the back of the house in stewarding or housekeeping, you couldn't even eat in the cafeteria because the front of the house, which was overwhelmingly white from South Boston, Charleston, that's where they were. So it's, Boston as a segregated community and city, and the hotel union was no different than that. So he comes in there as the reform candidate, as the reform president, changes that and wants to expand the benefits for the workers. So we ended up getting that into the contract, but we had 18 months to change the federal labor law. So we ended up going to Washington, met with Lane Kirkland, head of the AFL-CIO, patted us on the head saying, everything in Washington is a zero-sum game. To get something, you have to give up something. And said, you're never going to get it done because the building trades basically called the shots with the AFL-CIO. So we organized and we got us raised support from around the country. We got got Senator Kennedy on board. We got Congressman Moakley on board, and we organized. And we got the first George Bush in 1990 to sign it, and that was the first time a local union had ever changed the federal labor law.
Wow!
And it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
So I thought that was it. That was the pinnacle of what I would be doing. Everything else would be downhill from there. But that benefit didn't work because of the racist and the predatory practices of these banks. So an individual, because there was a lot of media around it, so an individual named Miles Iyamu calls me up and says, do you know about hard lenders? No idea. So he educated about hard lenders, predatory lenders. Met with Miles, and for 2.5 years we did the research. And then we took on Fleet Bank. That was a 4.5-year war. We coined the term predatory lending, and we won that. We won that war. Took 4.5 years. It was, there are actually some people in that campaign who actually died. It was pretty rough, very rough, actually. But this is fleet finance. This was definitely a rogue operation. I shouldn't say it was a rogue operation. It was very fundamental to fleet. They were generating over 40% of the profits. So the last thing we did to push them over the edge was that there was it was a breakfast meeting sponsored by the Harvard Business School.
Okay.
At the Newton Marriott Hotel. And so we stole the names, and Terry Murray, the CEO of Fleet, was speaking. And we stole the names of the Harvard Business School graduates. So about 40 of us went in there under the pseudonyms of these Harvard Business School graduates. And they hadn't seen too many minority Harvard Business School graduates. And we shut it down. We said to Terry Murray, we spread out and we shut it down. And we said, there's a lot of stories out there. This is just one of many of what we did. And he said to everybody that what we were saying about fleet finance was absolutely correct. that he would settle this within 2 weeks. And he was good to his word. So we had 3 meetings, each for a couple of hours. First one was to get to know each other and get a sense. We sort of knew each other, but to have that meeting face to face. Second one was to really define the basically the parameters of the agreement. The third one was to finalize it, sign it. So they did an in-city program for $8 billion. They settled all the lawsuits. Roy Barnes, who was a lawyer in Georgia. He was the Speaker of the House in Georgia at that time. He eventually becomes governor. We settled that case for $9 million. He got $3 million in fees. I mean, we settled all these cases, and then we got $140 million in this one mortgage product. Didn't give us $140 million of cash, that's in one mortgage. That's no down payment and no closing costs. And the last thing Terry Murray says to me, saying, I've given you everything you have demanded. Now you're going to be subjected to all the regulatory requirements that goes along with mortgage lending. Never going to be an activist again because I've given you enough rope to hang yourself.
Wow.
And he didn't say it in a bad way. He just said it as a matter of fact. He just said, this is it. Now, be careful what you ask for because you just got it.
Right.
What he didn't realize what he gave us is full control. So we took that $140 million in that mortgage product, no down payment, no closing costs. And we have expanded that to now $20 billion of the best mortgage in this country.
Right.
He's the best mortgage. So, and we were able to reinvent mortgage lending, starting out with that $140 million from Fleet.
Right.
And then I can tell you, we could spend hours talking about many hours, our campaigns during the mortgage crisis against Chase and taking over Jamie Dimon's property. I mean, going all kinds of things we did to Chase. And
I've seen the videos. And I also heard an audio recording of you testifying before Congress. And the testifying you're doing before Congress is you're literally pleading with them. And this was in 2000, I think. And you were telling them, look, if you keep loosening lending guidelines, you're going to create a housing crisis. You cannot continue to do this with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And the people you were talking to, ironically enough, were Dodd and Frank, who later came up with Dodd-Frank, right? The thing was, Dodd and Frank on either side, the congressional side and the Senate side, put enormous pressure on, and you remember all this, right? The whole thing about we need to increase the percent in the Clinton administration, we need to increase the percentage of home ownership. That carried over into the Bush administration, that same initiative. And the early 2000s, it was all about, the average home ownership in the US was 62% of people in the US owned a home. We need to push that number up. And so let's loosen the guidelines so that we can get that number up. And a lot of us, I've been doing this for 31 plus years. I've been in real estate and more. I started out in the mortgage business. A lot of us were literally pleading with the government not to do this. You were in Washington, talking to Congress. You were testifying before Congress, and I remember listening to those tapes, the audio of you just literally pleading with them, don't do this. And you really were a voice that we wished we had, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I was one of the first ones to actually predict the mortgage crisis.
You were.
So on September 12th of 2000, I invited to Congress by the Republicans.
Right.
And because I was critical of Fannie Mae at that point, Raines was the CEO, and Raines was the one who said, my family did subprime lending. Subprime lending is good. And actually, it was interesting. As an aside, to get into the hearings, you had to pay $500. Why is that? Because what they were doing is that we had always people want to get into hearings, but there's a massive line. So about 20 minutes before the hearing starts, there's a flip the line was homeless people that Fannie Mae was paying. And so what they did is that they would switch. So just before the hearing, the Fannie Mae executives would switch with the homeless people.
Oh my
And
gosh. So they were holding their place in line?
they're holding places, and that goes on today.
Oh,
That if you want to get into the hearings, what these companies do, and they charge huge amounts. So, you can't go to the homeless person and say, I'm going to switch with you, because they're hired by these companies. They go in and they're the line sitters. And they go in there like a day or two before for some of these, important hearings. So they pack the hearings with the executives and with their own people. So at that point, to get into that hearing, that was $500 for one person to get in. Now, so I testified, but when you heard that testimony, it was a battle between me and
oh yeah.
Maxine Hers and others. And
Yeah.
and they were going to hold me in contempt, because if you listen to that, I'm calling them liars. I'm
Yeah.
saying what they're saying is a lie.
Yeah.
They said, well, you can't call members of Congress liars. I said, well, if they ain't telling the truth, I'm calling them out. So it was a battle. I said, well, that's just the way it is.
Well,
So
I mean, it was
and-
very, very honest. Okay.
Yes.
And like I said, you were speaking for a lot of us that didn't have the opportunity to speak. And we were me in particular, I was incredibly grateful that you were doing that. And I found you and I found NACA by accident. I had started a radio show in San Diego a couple of months before you guys came to San Diego. But I had a client who, I was in the mortgage business. I was known as the guy who got people approved when they couldn't get approved. So like I got into the business because I got turned down for the first home loan I ever applied for. So I got into the business, and the very first home loan that I did my first month, 8 other lenders had turned them down, and they were going to lose their house to foreclosure, their dream house that they were building, if we hadn't gotten this done within the next 2 weeks. We got it done. We got it approved. Saved their house. It was incredible. The feeling was amazing. I made a reputation for myself as being somebody who studied guidelines, who figured out a way to make things work when everybody else just said, call me in 2 years or right. I was the guy who dug. I was the guy who got after it. And so in 2011, I had a client who had to short sale their house. They lost their house to short sale, basically. And they were so eager, and this, you've seen the look, I know you have, in the eyes of people who have lost their house to foreclosure, lost their house through bankruptcy, lost their house through short sale. Okay. They have a burning desire that is palpable. They want to own again. I helped this couple get into escrow on a property using a very, very not well-known FHA guideline, okay, that I could get them in faster than what they were told they could get in. The wife goes to her hairdresser, her hairstylist that she'd been seeing for years here in Escondido. Her hairstylist, she says, hey, why are you so happy? And she said, well, we got a house. We're in escrow on a house, and we're so excited. And I'm so happy. And her hairstylist started crying, and she goes, why are you crying? And she said, I'm losing my house in 18 days to trustee sale. I'm on my 8th loan modification application with Chase, and they're getting ready to turn it down for the 8th time. Okay. So this client of mine says, well, don't cry. Don't be upset. Don't worry. I'll have Mike call you. He'll take care of it. No pressure, right? No pressure. So the reason why I started the radio show was because I was frustrated, Bruce. I was having conversations with people one-on-one or one-on-two. I needed a bigger megaphone. And so I went out and started this radio show to get, because people, people were losing their houses to foreclosure right and left. I mean, it was crazy. And so I wanted to get the truth out. So what happens is the very next morning, after she has her call me, the very next morning, I'm having coffee with my wife, watching the KTLA Channel 5 News in Los Angeles. And they have an airship, a helicopter that's over the forum. You were there. They were over the forum, and they were filming or showing how far the line went all the way around the block. Do you remember this? And it was all filled up in front. They went to the reporter, that Eric, I forget his last name, but Eric's his first name. He's been there forever, right? They go to him and he's talking to one of your people that has on the loan shark, yellow t-shirt. By the way, I have one of those.
So use them, yep.
Right. Well, I used to volunteer with you guys. So it turns out all those people are all homeowners and they're trying to get a loan modification. And naturally, I just had this conversation the day before. So I look your website up. You guys are coming the next day to San Diego, the very next day. And so I went down to the convention center and I walked up to the front desk and she said, "Are you here to volunteer or are you here to get your loan modified?" And I said, "Neither. I'm here to see if you're for real. Because I've got a client potentially that I need to refer to you people, but I need to make sure you're for real." She goes, "Well, you need to meet Linda then." And she calls Linda. You remember Linda? She calls Linda. Linda comes out and takes me for a tour. And that's when I met you. You were on your phone talking, and she walked me up and she said, "Shake this guy's hand." And I shook your hand. You probably don't remember that, but Darren Duarte was right there next to you.
Yeah.
So I met Darren.
Yeah.
So we go through, we take the whole tour. Now I know you're for real. I am completely floored. I walked into the convention center with Linda. Within 30 seconds, there's a guy up on the dais with a microphone in his hand. And he says, "I want to thank Litton Loan Servicing for forgiving $99,000 of my principal." I had just had a conversation with Litton Loan Servicing's customer service department the week before about a client's friend who was losing her house to foreclosure with Litton. And I asked her, "Is there any way that you would ever forgive principal? Would you ever consider any other option?" And she said, "Mike, we never have, we will not now, and we never will forgive principal." And within 30 seconds of walking in there, this guy says this, okay, in front of everybody. And so you instantly got my attention. And then we finished the tour. The next day I come down and volunteer and they give me that beautiful. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.